Viewers, welcome back to the second part of the 11th episode of the India Shining YouTube channel. And as you all know, we compiled a list of all the positive events that happen around the world with respect to India-centric initiatives or events which are supposed to favor India. The whole idea is to have a very positive outlook after watching this channel and to go back and do what you do best in your respective fields. So in the second part, now we are continuing with the national policies, and now we are going to talk about the telecom sector moratorium. So we know that telecom has become the backbone of growth now, especially during the lockdown period and other periods. We have seen that during the COVID lockdowns, both on the first and the second waves, we have seen that the school education and the work from home had completely become dependent on the backbone of telecom sector. The broadbands have been put to great use, and therefore the digital divide between the urban and the rural has been considerably shrunk, and therefore telecom has become a very important backbone. But though it has become a very important backbone and today India has got one of the cheapest rates, the health of the telecom sector and the companies which operate in that domain have been constantly weakening. Now the reason for them has been a kind of a very lopsided, greedy approach by the government, where the government initially in the earlier phases thought that spectrum was a jackpot and they can keep milking it without allowing the companies to really stand on their feet and to have enough reserves, because this is a technology industry, intensive industry, and therefore there will always be need to constantly reinvest in new equipment and technology to ensure that India stays on par, if not better than the rest of the world. So over a period of years, there were many companies which are operating in telecom space, and we have just shrunk ourselves to three major players, and of that Vodafone has been significantly bleeding, especially after Jio had announced free schemes and they were able to use a small window period available to them through the telecom regulatory authorities policies, and therefore including Airtel and the others were also kind of a bleeding, but because Jio had a deeper pocket, they were able to sustain. But the general health of this industry was deteriorating, and therefore Vodafone was almost on the verge of default on their bonds. And this relief measure comes as a breath of fresh air, because for the first time, I think the government is beginning to, I wouldn't say the first time, it's the second time, the government is beginning to realize it's very important that we just don't have a duopoly in this industry, and then having a third player along with BSNL, if you consider it as a player, fourth player, is something that will really play out good for the country, because competition is always good because it keeps your price low, it improves your efficiency. So the government has announced a 4-year moratorium on payment of dues. It has rationalized the definition of adjusted gross revenue, because that was on kind of a very weird rule that we had with respect to adjusted gross revenue, where the non-telecom revenue has been excluded from AGR calculation now. This was a very funny concept that we had, where any advertising revenues and all those things were also clubbed, and license fee was expected to be paid for that. Now fortunately, the rationalized definition excludes the non-telecom revenue from AGR calculation, and most importantly, the one very big significant development that has happened is government has allowed 100% FDI into telecom via the automatic route, which means you don't have to fill up a form and send it to the ministry and wait for it to approve. And heavy interest, penalty, and interest on penalty and penalty on interest on the license fee, spectrum charges, and all kind of charges have been kind of completely rationalized. So I think there's a sense of sanity that has come back into the government's thinking, and they feel that it's very important for the industries to survive. And we always had a left-leaning approach as a country, and glorifying poverty and bringing down or talking bad about people who create jobs or the private ventures was always the fashionable trend. I think now the winds are changing a little bit, and rationality and the acknowledgement of private sector in creating jobs and better quality of life is just beginning to take shape. And the annual compounding interest, now the compounding interest, if any, will be compounded annually instead of monthly earlier. And the spectrum auction will be done for a period of 30 years instead of 20, which means the companies know that their revenue is there for a longer period, and therefore the possibility of them coming forward to invest in new technology is going to be that much better. And after the lock-in period of 10 years, the particular companies or the companies which won the spectrum, they will have the option of to surrender by paying a small surrender charges. So earlier it was like you get in and it was a one-way traffic, and there was never an option of exit, which is never good, because anytime you enter into any business, there should always be a possibility for you to exit, and there has to be exit rules, and there has to be an option to exit. Now the spectrum sharing has been made completely free, which means you don't have to go back to the ministry to share spectrum. And this is going to have a very big relief for companies like Vodafone, and a lot of thousands of crores that has been invested in infrastructure with respect to towers, the broadband fiber optics, and all those things will come to start paying better. And maybe the center was not receiving the money, so giving this moratorium is actually going to nurse back these companies into profitability, and the government will anyway be benefited because they will have a better collection of direct taxes. The next big initiative that the government has taken is creation of a national bad bank. Now, what is a national bad bank? That we know that the role of banks is always to lend, but not all decisions are taken right during the earlier periods. This has happened irrespective of party. We have had cycles of good lending practices and bad lending practices, and whenever lending has been intertwined with the political intervention, usually the loans have turned bad. And in India, we are carrying the cross of nationalized bank for quite a long time, and because it's nationalized, which means the politicians play a major role in asking the bank chairmen and the managing directors to extend a loan to people who are more favorably supporting them with respect to their election funding. All these things will always have someone has to foot the bill, and all these years the banks were footing the bill and the governments used to write up. Now I think once again a better sense has prevailed, and because ever since Mr. Raghuram Rajan came in as a RBI governor, and subsequently Mr. Urjit Patel, and even the current governor Mr. Shaktikant Das, they've all been taking a line where they've all been fighting for the autonomy of the banks, and I think government has favorably listened to them, number one. Number two, they're also beginning to make banks acknowledge the amount of bad loans that they have in their books and to clean them up. Now, with the NCLT coming in, the possibility of collection of old loans which have turned bad has really improved. But the banks just don't have the bandwidth and patience or the expertise to collect the bad loans. And therefore, creating a bad bank, which is called as the National Asset Reconstruction Company Limited, will allow these banks to transfer their bad loans into these asset reconstruction companies at a marginal cost, which a deep haircut. And the National Asset Reconstruction Company will have the expertise, will take over from there, and using the clause of subjugation, they will be fighting the case, and once they are able to recover the money, that's how that bank becomes profitable. And so on July 7th, we had Mr. Padma Kumar Madhavan Nair appointed as the MD, number one, and this entire NARCL will be owned by both public sector banks and the private sector lenders. And the government, very importantly, government has come forward to guarantee the security receipts issued by NARCL. So whenever a bad loan is being transferred, there will be a security receipt that will be issued to the banks or the lender, and this security receipts will be completely guaranteed by the government. Therefore, the fear of this being transferred and nothing coming back to the banks is not there, because it's government sovereign guaranteed. And this will allow currently the financiers to transfer close to 2 trillion Indian rupees of bad loans. So already public sector banks have identified 22 stressed assets. These assets are something where the consortium lending is more than 500 crores. So this the total amount of this 22 stressed loans works out to around 82,500 crores, and this will be the first tranche that will be transferred to the bad banks. Now, what is it going to do? Because the moment it is shifted to a bad bank, that bank takes the specialized role of retrieving the property or retrieving the loan amount using any one of the means available to them. But more importantly, the banks which have shifted out that assets will have the freedom and liberty to start lending again. because no economy functions unless the banks start lending money again. So the role of a bank is to lend money. Now it's you can't stop driving because you had a small accident. So any driving comes with the a chance of you meeting with an accident. So any lending comes with a chance of default. The banks cannot stop lending because they have had accidents on recovery, and therefore now having this bad bank will completely liberate these banks to go ahead with their lending, and maybe the norms will be much more stricter now, and there will be a lot more professionalism coming in. But the sectors, the small and medium sectors, the large capital expansion initiatives by the big corporations will all need capital, and this will bring back lending sanity to the whole thing, and this is going to play out very positively for our country. Viewers, till we come up with the next part of India Shining YouTube channel, please stay connected, stay healthy, stay happy, and stay positive. Thank you so much for watching our channel. We'll be back with more news for you soon. Thank you.